Ooh, hello. Welcome back, everybody. I feel like I am finally starting to get the hang of this, I think. You know, talking into a mic is extremely intimidating, but we're doing it, babe. We are doing it. And I have to tell you guys, okay? Big news. Prepare yourself. I have re entered the dating scene. Yes, terrifying. I know. But I feel like I've been putting myself out there a little bit more. And I really just feel like I'm entering this new chapter of my life, and everything just kind of feels a little bit different. And yeah, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm like a brand new bitch, babe. Okay. And I think the way that I am approaching dating now is very, very different than I feel like how I've approached dating in the past. And also, I haven't really done another episode on dating in this day and age in a while, so I just feel like we're due for one. And honestly, I just want to share all my thoughts with you on this. So today, I really want to dive into navigating our anxieties in the dating world. I feel like this is a topic that isn't really being talked about, and I think it's important that we learn how to recognize our own triggers so that we can pursue a relationship with clarity and not feed into all of the fears that our nervous system has created based on all of our previous romantic experiences, or, how we've grown up receiving and perceiving love. Does that make sense? So that's what I want to get into today. I think the first step in navigating your anxieties in the dating world is to first recognize what your triggers are, right? And sometimes this takes a whole hell of a lot of trial and error, okay? And trust me, I am very good at this part of the process because, in all honesty, I didn't even realize this until just recently, that the way I was responding or reacting to certain situations was a response to how I've been treated in the past. And in a lot of ways, I didn't allow, the relationships that I was pursuing to just unfold naturally because I had such a tight grip on what I wanted the relationship to be. And I hope that makes sense, but I just didn't realize that so much of my past relationship traumas were getting in the way of my present dating experience. So if you want to understand what triggers you, we got to go back to the beginning, babe. How do you remember receiving love as a child? That's the biggest question you need to ask yourself. Was it only ever conditional? Did you do things a certain way because that's how you knew you were going to receive love? Do you get what I'm saying? As a child, a parent's love is so important because it sets the foundation for how we perceive and receive love when we get older. And nobody's perfect, right? This isn't an episode to call out all the bad parents or even the parents that just did the best that they could. It's just a moment for all of us to recognize how we grew up understanding love. When I started asking myself these questions in my healing journey, I started to realize a pattern within myself. Historically, for me, I have always associated love with validation. And when my brother was born, there was a shift in attention with my parents, and rightfully so. You know what I mean? Enter newborn. And, the child in me had gotten so used to just receiving their love all to myself. But when my brother was born, the love was now spread. And, maybe for a few years, it was more focused on my brother. Again, Not bashing on my parents because they did the best they could and I love them very much. However, this change in dynamic, I think subconsciously triggered something in my nervous system to start reacting in a way that would garner my parents' attention towards me. Does that make sense? So I became this overachiever, this perfect child that tried to do everything right. And I started to believe that in order to receive love, I had to prove that I was worthy of it. And holy shit, has that fucked me up for some years, okay? Talk about overgiving in relationships. In my early years of dating, and I mean early, right? I'm talking about like 16, 17. I was so keen on like being this perfect girlfriend who always showed up for them and helped them through all of their problems and didn't bring up the things that truly bothered me because I was terrified that if I did, they would leave and I'd be alone. You know, eventually though, it got to a point emotionally for me where I had to leave those relationships because they became so draining. And even in some of my most recent years of dating, I've developed this same concept, but it's more like I walk into relationships with the fear of not being chosen. So a lot of times I would react out of fear, and that has pushed away a lot of potential people because that's that anxious attachment style, right? And that need for validation. It's like I had to make sure that they were going to be latched on and locked in with me after the first month of us getting to know each other. And it's like, first of all, that's not fair to the other person to put that much pressure on them, you know what I mean, on somebody else. And secondly, we don't even know each other that well, babe. Like, I don't know if you sleep with your socks on or chew with your mouth open. Like, what the fuck? Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that you really have to understand how you perceive love, but you also have to know why. Because when you know why, you can start to recognize it as your triggers come up. And you can start to not be so reactionary. This takes a lot of patience with yourself. You have to slow down, number one, and really just start to become more aware of your own triggers. And like I said, it just takes a lot of trial and error. Sometimes you have to go through a few situationships to be like, oh shit, wait a minute. I might be the problem here. You know, like, why the hell did I just react that way? Or why is this person or situation triggering me so much? Like, let's step back and unpack that a little bit. So, okay, now that we've got that out of the way, what happens when you finally start to recognize those triggers? Well, first and foremost, you should be proud that you've done enough healing to actually label them. But we also have to be very careful that we don't try to sabotage new connections as they come about. We don't want those fears to come in and rule the outcome of the connection. And at the same time, we don't want our fears and anxieties to blind us from seeing something that is unhealthy either, right? So now the question becomes, how do you calm those anxieties and not let them take control of the situation? Well, you guys, lucky for you, I'm currently running into this dilemma, all right? I may have met somebody that I'm kind of sort of excited about, you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to fluff it up too much because it's definitely in the early stages. And I'd really like to keep a large portion of this private. However, I do want to talk about it because I have started to recognize some of my own anxieties showing up in this connection. And I want to talk about, you know, how I've kind of handled them up until this point. And I think that they would be helpful for the class to hear. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now, as I stated previously, historically, I've always related love to receiving validation. And this shows up in many ways for me, but I think the most common way that this shows up for me is when there is like a lack of communication. And let me just say, in general, navigating communication in this day and age is so challenging because of our phones. Like, think about it. Before, people couldn't just put a communication device in their back pocket. You know what I mean? You had to wait for somebody to call your landline or see them in person. Like, that's not, my parents didn't grow up that way. You get what I'm saying? Like, they didn't have this instant communication that we see in our society today. You know, we live in a world of Snapchats and DMs and text messages, and communication is just a lot more accessible. And I don't know if I love this or I hate it. There's obviously some pros and cons to it, because on one hand, this has made it easier to connect with someone who maybe you wouldn't have otherwise met. And it also can take away a little bit of that pressure if you do want to approach somebody, but you're like, oh, I don't really want to do it in person, but like I have their Instagram, so like, why not, you know? But on the other hand, I think there's this expectation that because communication is so accessible, it just needs to be happening all the time. And, you know, that's how my nervous system has gotten used to operating, is that when somebody's not communicating with me, that means they're not interested. You know what I mean? Like, my brain just suddenly rushes into, oh my gosh, they don't like me. Oh my gosh, I made them mad. Oh my gosh, they're going to leave. Like, I didn't do enough to make them stay. Hello? Let's just calm the fuck down, brain. Like, why are we jumping to conclusions that we don't even know if they exist, first off? But that's what I had gotten used to. And I just immediately jumped to those conclusions. Whereas now I recognize when my brain starts to go there and I reel it in, babe. I'm like, nope, we're not going there. Let's just allow them to show us how they communicate rather than assume we know the outcome of the lack of their response. The other thing that I realized is that I would become so overconsumed, you know, waiting for a response, that I wasn't allowing myself to be present in whatever it was that I was doing, whether that was hanging out with friends, working on something creative, spending time with family, God forbid. You know, I was so hung up on waiting for a response and so invested in talking to them that I feel like looking back, I've lost a lot of precious present moments because I was so busy being consumed by another person's attention. Fuck, don't you just love being addicted to validation? Like, wow, what a great fucking piece of baggage that is. Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? Sorry, I should not use the Lord's name in vain. I apologize. That was very uncalled for and inappropriate. Moving on. The other thing, too, is that especially in like my most recent past, the partners that I chose actually did lack consistency, which piqued my anxiety even more because I actually didn't know when the next time was going to be that they were going to reach out to me or that I was going to hear from them. And I didn't know where we stood. I didn't know if they saw a viable future with me because they were so inconsistent with their behaviors. And they always seemed to keep me around, but only when it was convenient to them, probably due to whatever the fuck trauma responses they, react with. I don't know. Point is, that type of interaction definitely fed my validation monster. And eventually, I always ended up reacting to my triggers and anxieties because I didn't even know how to navigate something unhealthy when I saw it. So I fed into my anxieties instead of recognizing the situation and seeing the situation for what it was and just walking away from somebody who was incapable of showing me the respect that I deserve. Now, eventually, I always walked away because I'm that bitch, but it just took me a little bit longer than it should have, right? But because I went through those experiences, I'm now able to recognize what I deserve for myself and how to kind of allow somebody to come in naturally and not be so wrapped up in this person. Because guess what? I have my own life. You know what I mean? I have all of these things that I'm creating just for me. They're not the whole puzzle, babe. They're just a piece of it. And that's okay. Like, I think I used to be so obsessed with the idea that a relationship meant that that was going to be the center of my life. And that is just not true. The situation that I find myself in currently has been like a breath of fresh air, you guys, because first of all, I have chosen to just observe and not anxiously attach to the outcome. And the more I observe how they communicate with me and how they treat me, the more I've been able to see the situation for what it is. And guess what? I'm actually having a lot of fun. I actually really appreciate this person's company. And there's so much beauty in allowing yourself to just observe, because that takes the pressure off of you, but it also takes the pressure off the other person. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are able to just experience one another and get to know one another in that space without all these extra fucking anxieties bothering it. You know, you got to see each other as individuals first and find out if you actually like this person before you start fantasizing about the fucking 2-car garage and 3 kids. Like, seriously, just observe, watch, and see what happens. Allow shit to unfold in front of your eyes and not in your head, because that's when you can get into trouble. I know how easy it is to get caught up in the desire of it all, right? Like, no one wants to be alone. And at the end of the day, when there is somebody there who is showing you attention in that way, it can definitely feed into those desires. But it also distracts us from what is actually happening. So just be careful. That's all I'm saying. Now, the last thing that I want to mention is that you sometimes have to trick your brain into reacting in a healthy way. Okay, let me explain. For example, I've chosen to label this communication style that I have with this new connection as if they're one of my friends. Let me try to unpack this for you guys, okay? I don't communicate with my friends on a daily basis, but I am consistent, and so are they. I don't have to worry that they won't be there the next day just because we didn't communicate at all that day. You know what I mean? My friends know that I'm still fucking with them unless I say otherwise, or vice versa. So you get what I'm saying? And in doing this, I have been able to release a lot of my triggered anxieties because I don't have to spend time worrying if they're going to communicate with me or not. And the question isn't, why aren't they responding? It's now just become more of a relaxed statement. Like, I'm excited to hear from them later. Like, I don't have to hear from them right now. You see what I'm saying? It's becoming something to look forward to instead of something for me to be anxious about. And also, because they have been consistent, I haven't had to be as anxious. You know, when they say they're going to call me, they call. You get what I'm saying? So anyway, the other thing that I've been trying to teach my brain is that it's okay to not be available 24/7. You know, like, even if they call me while I'm doing something, I'm allowed to, like, not answer them. You know what I mean? I'm allowed to be present and enjoy my life outside of this connection. And this is one that has been really hard for me because traditionally, like I said, I've always thought that being in a relationship meant that we need to be doing everything together all the time and we need to be communicating all the time. And that's just unrealistic as fuck. It is so important that you have things that you do outside of your relationship because that's prioritizing you and showing yourself love. Your relationship with yourself is actually more important than any relationship you'll ever have. Because if you can't show up for yourself first, I mean, we've heard this fucking saying a million times, you won't be able to show up for anybody else. And the other thing is that you'll start relying on that person for your happiness, for love, for all of these different things. And that is just not correct, my boy. Okay? I think the biggest thing is giving yourself permission to enjoy your time outside of your partner and not feel guilty about it. Your brain may try to come up with all of these reasons why you shouldn't. Don't let it. You know what I mean? Allow yourself to be present in your own life. It's okay, babe. Here's the thing. Your anxieties are always going to be present, especially when it comes to a new connection, right? And what works for me might not work for you, but having some tools in your back pocket to reframe and retrain your brain to not respond or react in the way that you have in the past can really soothe some of those fears and give you a clearer understanding of what's actually happening. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I'm making sense, babe. And now that I've dumped all my relationship triggers on you, I think that concludes the episode. Only slightly joking, but in all seriousness, my challenge to all of you is to really get to know your own triggers. Start asking yourself those hard questions like, how do I remember receiving love as a child? And try to pause in the moments you feel your anxieties peaking. Slow down and ask yourself, why do I feel triggered right now? And can I find a solution on my own before I just react? How do I feel in this moment? Let's just recognize this and put it in our back pocket and unpack it later. Allow yourself to just observe the connection. Observe the person that you are getting to know. Allow the connection to unfold in front of your eyes. Let them show you who they are rather than fantasize about the 3 kids that you're going to have with them and the white dog and the picket fence. Like, stop. Okay? And lastly, start providing yourself with the tools to combat your anxieties and triggers. Don't let them rule the outcome. Always try to lead with clarity and not fear. Okay? I think that's all I have for you today. And you know what, guys? I got to be honest. This was pretty smooth sailing today. I don't know. I felt really passionate about this topic, and I guess it's something that I'm currently going through. So it's like nice to be able to be like, hey, this is what I'm going through and this is how I'm dealing with it. So maybe somebody else is going through the same shit. I don't know. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in today. And I hope that you guys took something from this. And I really like having these conversations about dating because I think it's really nice to talk about because I don't hear people talking about it, and it's nice to not feel alone in talking about this. Do you get what I'm saying? So anyway, I will see you guys next week, and thanks for tuning in. Bye.